I know I just said I don't like giving advice. I'm going to give some advice now. Hello, my name is Dami. I'm a writer, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the query letters that got me my publishing deal and the query letter that got me my agent. When I queried my very first book, I did not sign with an agent. I ended up signing with a small press indie publisher. And so I'll go over that query for Children with Gifts. And I'll also go over the queries that got me my agent, and kind of like the final form of the query for The Sun Has a Shadow, which is the book that I am currently revising with my agent. The whole purpose of this video is really just to kind of show the progression, for you to critique them yourselves, kind of see like what works, what doesn't work, just give an example of like my thought process while writing, what I did wrong, what I didn't do great. I think something that's severely lacking in publishing is transparency. So I will be as transparent as I can be. That is all I ever want to be on this channel, is just transparent. A little bit of background to my first time querying. When I was querying Children with Gifts, I'd never queried before. This is my first time querying ever. And so of course I went on Google and Reddit and all the forums and all that Twitter, all that jazz, to get as much like information as I could about querying. And the purpose of showing you like the very first query that I sent out and the one that got me my publishing deal is for you to kind of see the progression and the change. This was a gradual process. So these were not the only 2 query letters. I had lots of different versions that eventually got me to like the query letters like final form. But let us get into the first one. So I'm just gonna read it, and I'll have it posted up here so you can see it, and then we'll go through it kind of paragraph at a time. Version 1. I'm seeking representation for my book Children with Gifts, an 87,000 word YA fantasy novel. I hope you'll enjoy this book. As your manuscript wish list mentions an interest in morally gray and complicated characters, it will appeal to fans of Six of Crows' Fine Family and Heist arc, Westworld's corruption arc, and Vicious's by V.E. Schwab's superhero themes. Anthony Velasquez, an 18-year-old high school dropout with the gift of cryokinesis, is abducted from his home, leaving his only sister Vanessa behind. For nearly 2 years, he is forced to use his gift to fight others like him in a gladiator-style illegal underground fight club, The Arena. Then one day, he's picked up by a group of dysfunctional and possibly sociopathic mercenaries. But Anthony isn't free yet. He and his fellow guns for hire, a girl with enhanced senses, a woman with the ability to heal and to hurt, and a doctor who can sense and change emotions, are hired to recover the most sensitive information the world has yet to uncover. It's a race against the clock to find this information and keep secrets hidden, but as their journey unfolds, the ugly truths about their gifts, their employer, and their assigned job begin to surface. Soon, paranoia takes root, and it isn't long before the 4 of them start to ask the dangerous questions. Whose side are they on? Where did these gifts come from? And what does have to do with all of this? And then there's the bio, which I'm not going to go into at all because I don't feel like doxing myself. So that was the first one. And I'm just going to go through it like paragraph at a time, my notes for it. So the first paragraph basically includes all of my metadata, which is kind of like what the book's about, how long it is, what genre it fits in. I mentioned there, like your manuscript wish list mentions an interest in this. So I personalized this particular query. And I'll go into personalizations at the very end. At the very end of this video, I'll go into like tips for querying. That's where I personalized it. I think metadata is a good place to do that. Honestly, I think it's okay. I think I prefer how it's written later, which we'll go into, but I think it's okay. Going to the second paragraph, I don't like my use of the very last sentence. Then one day he's picked up by a group of dysfunctional and possibly sociopathic mercenaries. I don't like that because I feel like it's a little bit ableist, that sociopathic piece. And I actually learned a lot about just like ableism in writing while I was querying, to be honest, especially like in the psychiatric field, because I think about psychiatric terms in terms of like diagnosis, right? I'm a psychiatrist, so I think about them in terms of like diagnostic criteria. And sociopathy is not in the DSM, but like over time, like as I've been querying and as I've just been like educating myself, I feel like it's a little bit ableist. I don't like that language, and it does disappear in further iterations of this, but I don't like that language. Also, in terms of the second paragraph, there's a couple things I don't like in terms of just phrasing and prose. For example, for nearly 2 years, he's forced to use his gift to fight others like him in a gladiator-style illegal underground fight club. I think that's just like we're mixing up a lot of like adjectives, which I do change later on. The biggest issue with this query is that it's way too vague and it doesn't really go into the pitch. If you can hear my dog snoring, I'm gonna let him snore this time. But it's a little bit too vague. The query needs to have like the full pitch, and the pitch is like answers 4 questions, which is who is the main character, what does he want, what is stopping him, and what are the choices that he makes to get that, to accomplish his goals or not accomplish his goals. And in this query, I only really answer who's the main character. which is Anthony. And frankly, only somewhat, because it truly is an ensemble cast. The very first point of view isn't even Anthony's, but the story kind of revolves around him, and that kind of gets into the chosen one trope. Doesn't matter. We'll get into those details later. It doesn't really answer a lot of those pitch questions. It's too vague, doesn't answer the questions that agents want. Why do they have to do this? What's driving them? What are the stakes of the book? Yes, we know that Anthony's main character and he's hired to go do a thing, and it's okay that we don't necessarily know what that thing is. That's part of the story, but we don't explain like why he has to do it. Like, yes, he's hired, but why does he accept? Why does he say no? That's not even discussed in this version of the query. In terms of like stakes, in terms of like conflict, there's a little bit of the time constraint that's put in here. It's a race against the clock. I think that's also just a little bit cliche, that phrasing. I don't think it's horrible, but I think just in combination with how vague everything is, I think it's a little bit too much. But yes, there's like an idea of them discovering secrets, but like, why does it matter that they discover these secrets? Why would they want to? Do they want to protect these secrets as well? Whose secrets are these? Like, none of that's really asked. Or answered in this query, so I think that's a big problem with it. The stakes aren't in here, you know, like what, like if he doesn't take the job, what happens? If he does take the job, what happens? Why did I even mention the gladiator like fight club to begin with? Because he's rescued and then he's hired to do something else. Why did I even mention where he came from in the query? That might be relevant in the story, but why does that matter in the query? Because it doesn't seem to play a role in like stakes or the choices that he makes, because I didn't make that clear in this query. So this is like my very first query letter ever. At this point, I think I'd had some people take a look at it, and they made suggestions that led to this query, but looking at it, not great. Needed to clean it up, and there were many iterations of this query over time. So I went to the subreddit pub tips, and they basically told you what I just told you, and so that was very helpful in beefing up this query. Over time, kind of like just learned more about the industry and about querying and how things work, and so I was able to fix it a little bit more, which leads us to the final iteration, the final version of this query. Six of Crows meets Marvel's X-Men in Children with Gifts, a 90,000-word YA urban science fiction fantasy about young people with powers and the lengths we'll go for the people we love, with a special emphasis on siblings, found families, and sapphic love. It features a high-stakes heist, a diverse ensemble cast, and it will appeal to fans of Neil Shusterman and Marie Lu. 2 years ago, Anthony Velasquez, a teenager with the gift of cryokinesis, was kidnapped and imprisoned within an expansive network of illegal gladiator-style fight clubs called the Arenas. Just as he begins to lose all hope of ever being found, he wakes up to find his arena destroyed, his captors dead, and a trio of dysfunctional mercenaries, a teenager with superhuman reflexes, a woman with healing powers, and an empath who is slowly losing her mind, pulling him out of the rubble. Except Anthony's knights in shining armor aren't selfless heroes at all. They are unwilling pawns in a powerful organization led by the ruthless Min Lu. Min harbors a secret that could expose her organization and topple the empire she's painstakingly built. When that secret is stolen from her, she hires Anthony and her three reluctant mercenaries to find the girl who robbed her and silence her by any means necessary. And Anthony, recently freed from the violent and deadly arenas, is in no position to refuse. But as the crew hunts for the thief, they unearth long-buried secrets about the gifted and the arenas. Soon they find themselves on the verge of uncovering a massive conspiracy that could plunge their world and other worlds into chaos and war. Loyalties are further tested when they discover the identity of Min's thief, and eventually the crew must decide if Min's secrets are really hers to keep. If they choose to double-cross Min and expose her villainous plot and heinous schemes, they'll have to make it count. Otherwise, they risk the wrath of a powerful woman with nothing left to lose and the means to destroy everyone they love. That one reads so much better already. Reading them out loud really makes that clear. So let's go point by point with this one, kind of what got better, and maybe what I could have even like made a little bit better moving forward. Starting off with the very first paragraph, that metadata, it's a little bit beefier. As you can see, looking from the first version to second version, there were also revisions that happened with this book because the word count exploded a little bit, but we're still okay with a sci-fi fantasy sort of word count. We're under that 100K, so we're still good. I also got a little bit more specific with the genre because it is a little bit of a genre blending story. I also prefer where I put like the tropes. Like, these are the tropes, here's your marketing, like this is like your little marketing like tidbit. Like, this is how it would be marketed. That's basically what that is. Who would like it? Who's it for? What are the tropes? How will people like find it and get attracted to it? So moving on to the second paragraph, I probably could delete like the 2 years ago piece. Like, 2 years ago, Anthony, a teenager with the gift of cryokinesis. Just the 2 years ago piece, because I think it makes things confusing as to where does this story actually start. Like, does it start 2 years ago, or does it start like in present day and we're just recalling what happened 2 years ago? I think that makes it confusing, and for the purpose of the query itself, I don't think it matters. I can just say that he's been fighting in a fight club and then he's rescued. And then moving on, added a lot more like those vital elements of like the pitch, right? So not only who is the main character, but I do go into a little bit more detail, I think, with this one, with who the other characters are, because it is an ensemble cast. So I mentioned like the teenager with reflexes, the one with healing powers, and the empath who's slowly losing her mind. Who are the main characters? What do they want? And it's clear that, Anthony, for example, he was just freed from the arenas. That's why he would want to do this job, because he doesn't want to go back. What stands in their way? And I don't go into details either in this version, but it's clear that it's about like these secrets are about like who the gifted are and what they're doing here. And so that causes them to question everything. And so that's kind of what stands in their way. It's like essentially their morals, their beliefs, and what are the stakes? Like if they don't do what they say, clearly this person is powerful enough to destroy everything that they care about, people that they love. So I think that was a lot better in this. I also really do love that line, the very last one. They risk the wrath of a powerful woman with nothing left to lose and the means to destroy everyone they love. Because it does allude to the fact that the villain also is like a completed villain who also has wants and desires, and there's like stakes into this as well, as opposed to just like big bad for the sake of being big bad. So I think I like that it kind of alludes to that. Final thoughts about this query, or this version of the query. It is on the longer side. So it's 380 words, including the bio though. I think that pumps it up to like 470. The magic number that I've read at places is you want the query to be between 300 to 500 words. And so this one's like kind of pushing the border a little bit. Another rule of thumb I see is 1 page single spaced. What was hard about writing this query letter for me was the fact that it's multi-POV and an ensemble cast, because answering that question, like who's the main character, what's the stakes, what do they want, I was like, well, there are many points of views and they're all very like well developed, and each of them have their own stakes in all of this. And so I didn't want to be like deceitful in saying Anthony's the main character, but he really is like the central character. Overall, I think this was a much stronger query letter, and even if it was a little bit lengthy, a little bit wordy, but I think it worked. That was the query that got me my publishing deal. So now let's go into the one that got me my agent, which is gonna, I think this half of the video will be a little bit longer. So here we go. First version of this query that I sent out. Aragon meets Sky Hunter in The Sun Has a Shadow, a 71K YA fantasy set in a world where dragon riders devour the monsters at night and phoenix riders herald the rise of the sun in the morning. It is a story about redemption, hope, and self-rediscovery in the context of depression and addiction. The setting is partially inspired by the Igbo and Yoruba tribes of Nigeria. No one has seen the sun in 5 years, not since the queen ordered the genocide of the phoenix riders, heralders of the sun. Despite the never-ending night and the nightmares that skulk between cities, 18-year-old Baba Tunji makes a living delivering messages and cargo, braving the Shadowlands alone. But his life of quiet isolation is ripped out from under him when a job goes sideways and he finds himself indebted to a dangerous dragon rider. Desperate and out of options, he agrees to a simple job with a suspiciously big payout. Escort Layo, one of the last Phoenix Rider descendants, to the other side of the country. But after they survive an assassination attempt ordered by the Queen, Layo confesses her true purpose, and I'm editing that part out so that you don't know what it is. Her success would mean the return of the sun, the return of the Phoenix Riders, and a means to finally end the Queen's dark reign. Baba and Layo escape ambushes, form alliances, and face the nightmares that lurk in the endless night while the Queen and her Dragon Rider army nip at their heels. However, Baba harbors a secret that he's buried in shame, loneliness, and laudanum. But if he and Layo have any chance of surviving this world from this endless night, Baba will have to confront his shame and his secrets once and for all, even if it means losing Layo and possibly his own life. Overall, I think this one is not bad. I'm going to start off with the very beginning, though. Aragon meets Sky Hunter. What was I thinking?
Are you not ashamed of yourself? Are you not embarrassed? This is really embarrassing.
Kind of rule of thumb when it comes to putting in comp titles for your book, don't use touchstone works of media, specifically books. I'd say not even necessarily movies, but movies and film. But with books, a general rule of thumb is to not use touchstone books. So things like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, like don't use those. But I think the issue was I really wanted to escape any semblance of a comparison to Fourth Wing. And it's an old book. You should use like more recent comps. Yeah, I think the mix between the fact that it was like a global phenomenon sensation when it came out, plus it's an old book, just no, don't do that. But I just didn't want a dragon comp that was Fourth Wing, and I was like, literally anything else. Props to me, because with this pitch, I did a much better job, even though this was my first pitch that I sent out, I did a much better job of including like all aspects of the pitch, like who is the main character, what do they want, what's in their way, and what are the choices that they make, what are the stakes. Like, who's the main character? It's Baba, and I also include Layo, right? Those are the main characters. What do they want? To bring back the sun. What gets in their way? The Queen. And honestly, I don't have a whole ton of notes for myself, like with this query, other than the Aragon, which did disappear. That comp title did disappear. Honestly, I think it was okay. I don't think it was that bad. But I think I did make it better. So let's move on to the second version. And this is the version that got me my agent. Now, there's going to be one more version of this query letter after this, and I'll explain why in a second. But this is the query letter that got me my agent. Beasts Made of Night meets Sky Hunter in The Sun Has a Shadow, a 71K YA high-stakes fantasy set in a world where dragon riders devour the monsters at night and phoenix riders herald the rise of the sun in the morning. It is a story about redemption, hope, and self-rediscovery in the context of depression and addiction. The setting is fictional but inspired by the Igbo and Yoruba tribes of Nigeria. No one has seen the sun in 5 years, not since the queen ordered the genocide of the Phoenix Riders, heralders of the sun. Despite the never-ending night and the nightmares that skulk between the cities, 18-year-old Babatunji makes a living delivering messages and cargo, braving the Shadowlands alone. But his life of quiet isolation is ripped out from under him when a job goes sideways and he finds himself indebted to a dangerous dragon rider. Desperate and out of options, he reluctantly agrees to the first job that comes his way: escort Lio, one of the last Phoenix Rider descendants, to the other side of the monster-stricken country. But after Baba and Lio survive an assassination attempt ordered by the queen, Lio confesses her true purpose, which I'm bleeping out for you guys, sorry. Her success would mean the return of the sun, the return of the Phoenix Riders, and a means to finally end the queen's dark reign. Baba and Lio escape ambushes, form alliances, and face the nightmares that lurk in the endless night while the queen and her dragon rider army nip at their heels. But Baba harbors a terrible secret that could jeopardize them both. It's a secret he's buried in shame, loneliness, and laudanum, and if he and Lio have any chance of surviving this world from this endless night, Baba will have to confront his shame and his secrets once and for all, even if it means losing Lio and possibly his own life. Not a whole lot of changes with this version, other than we got rid of Aragon. So in the second paragraph, I did remove some details. For example, suspiciously big payout. I removed that just because I felt like it was muddying the query. It's not a detail that's super necessary to understanding the purpose of why they have to set off to do this thing. Baba owes people money, so he takes the job. So that's this version, which I think was pretty good. The second query is the one that got me my agent. I don't have access to query tracker anymore. I tried to like double check and see like what number that was, but I think she was like between like the 15th and 20th agent that I queried. But agents take a long time to respond. So by the time that she gave me my offer, I had queried like another 60 agents, right? And by that time, this new version is the one that I was using to query, and I was getting bites with this version of the query letter. So it's the final form of the query, but it isn't necessarily the one that got me my agent. This one is a bit different. So here we go. In Ibana, dragon riders devour the nightmares that lurk in the shadows of night, while Phoenix riders herald the rise of the sun every morning. But 5 years ago, the queen killed her family, usurped the throne, and ordered the genocide of all Phoenix riders. No one has seen the sun since then. Despite the never-ending night and the nightmares that skulk between the cities, 18-year-old Babatunji makes a living delivering messages and cargo, braving the Shadowlands alone. But his life of quiet isolation is ripped out from under him when he finds himself indebted to a dangerous dragon rider. Desperate and out of options, he reluctantly agrees to the first job that comes his way: escort Lio, one of the last Phoenix Rider descendants, to the other side of the country. But after Baba and Lio survive an assassination attempt ordered by the queen, Lio confesses her true purpose. Boom, so that's a spoiler. Her success would mean the return of the sun, the return of the Phoenix Riders, and a means to finally end the queen's dark reign. Baba and Lio escape ambushes and face the nightmares that lurk in the night while the queen and her dragon rider army nip at their heels. As Baba and Lio's alliance blossoms into something more, Baba comes to terms with the terrifying realization: the key to Lio's success is also Baba's greatest secret. It's a secret he's buried in shame, loneliness, and laudanum. But if they have any chance of saving their world from this endless night, Baba will have to confront his shame and expose the darkest parts of himself. Doing so could cost him his life, but worst of all, it could confirm what he always suspected: that he was never deserving of redemption in the first place. And then I include the metadata. Beast Made of Night meets Sky Hunter in The Sun Has a Shadow, a high-stakes fantasy about rediscovering one's agency and how the threads of guilt, depression, and addiction create the tapestry of isolation and shame. It is complete at 76k words and set in a fictional world that is culturally inspired by the Igbo and Yoruba tribes of Nigeria, #own voices. It will appeal to fans of slow burn romance and shadow magic. Despite its darker themes, it will leave readers feeling hopeful about these characters, their journeys, and themselves. So this one is a bit different. We'll start with structure. So in this one, I actually put the metadata at the very end. I don't think it matters where you put your metadata, at the very beginning or the very end. I think I've read a lot of agents prefer the beginning. I haven't, but a lot of agents don't mind if it's at the end. I've seen a lot of successful query letters where it's at the end or at the beginning. I don't think it matters. I think it's total preference. I was just going to try something new, seeing if that made a difference, thinking if I just got to the meat of like the query letter and then had the metadata at the end, that could be helpful. Just try something new, see if it made a difference. I don't know if it did. I struggled with a succinct way to basically say dragon riders protect from monsters at night, Phoenix riders bring the sun in the morning, and the Phoenix riders are all dead, so now it's endless night. Like, I struggled with a way to say that succinctly. That was kind of like a new version, a new way to say it. Don't know if it was better or worse or whatever. But it also meant like I had that break. No one has seen the sun since then, which I think was like a nice punchy thing that could garner interest. And so that's what I liked about the way I phrased it here. I also go a little bit more into like B-plot, I guess, romance, right? So the romance element, that is kind of more more openly mentioned in this query, as Baba and Alliance blossom into something more. So that's clearly like the romance subplot that's going on. I'm also a little bit more blatant with the stakes, but not just the major, well, not just like the major plotline stakes, which is bring back the sun or nah, but also the B subplot stakes, which is like this feeling of like redemption, deserving, B plot, internal conflict. So I like this query because I managed to mention not just major plot stakes, but also the B subplot stakes. Which I think is super hard to do. And I'm kind of curious, I might look this up later, but I wonder if that's even like recommended to do. This is also on the longer side of things. I think this is a longer query. I'm not quite sure. I did not make a note of how long this was, but it kind of reads a little bit longer to me. So my final thoughts with this version of the query. I like this version because I include the subplot stakes, the subplot point of the story. So I also like this inclusion because I'm a little blatant with the themes of the story. The themes of the book are more obvious as this query grows and progresses. Shame and loneliness, but then I go a little bit deeper and go like, this is a story just not about shame and loneliness, but like addiction, depression, and guilt that's tied with that. I mean, these are like heavy themes, and so I do mention at the very end, like despite its darker themes, it will leave readers feeling hopeful about these characters, their journeys, and themselves, because I wanted agents to know that yes, it's heavy, but it's also hopeful. I also really love this last line right before the metadata. Doing so could cost him his life, but worst of all, it could confirm what he always suspected, that he was never deserving of redemption in the first place. I really like that line because I think that really does sum up like his journey. So those are all three versions of The Sun Has a Shadow and its query. Curious as to like what your favorite version is, because again, there's a third version, kind of like the leveled up version, the final form, but there's also like the second version that did get me my agent. So clearly it was good enough. So let me know which ones of those you liked, which ones you didn't like, what your thoughts were with those queries. My tips about querying. And I don't like giving advice. I don't like giving advice because it's just very personal. This is a very subjective industry, different strokes for different folks. And so I think, yes, I'll give my tips. And these are just like things that worked for me and were helpful for me. But if you don't find them helpful or you think you're dumb, don't do it. My first tip is include the metadata and make the metadata one paragraph. So the metadata is, the title of your book, the comps, themes, your like one-liner pitch, tropes. Include all of that in one paragraph. I think that's generally how it's recommended you do it. I don't know if it matters if it's the first paragraph or the last paragraph, but let me know what your preferences are. What did you like better? Did you like the metadata at the very beginning or did you like the metadata at the very end? Number 2, include all aspects of your pitch. I think a lot of people will talk about this when querying as the hook. And frankly, I found that advice confusing because people describe the hook in a lot of different ways. Like I even just like did a quick Google search, like what is the hook of a query letter? Some people described it as like a one-liner, which to me is just like a one-line pitch. Some people described it as it has to include character, plot, and theme. Some people just said that it's a succinct statement that makes the book concept easy to grasp and excites the agent, which to me is super subjective and very vague. And so, yes, include the hook. I don't really know what that means. I like the idea of the pitch includes 4 things. And the pitch includes who's your main character, what do they want, what's in their way, and what are the choices that they have to make, what are the stakes. 3 C's, conflict, choice, consequence. So because that includes like the stakes of your story. Just make sure when you are submitting your query, make sure that you actually answer all of those questions, because looking at my very first query, I didn't answer a lot of those questions really. So I think like that's a helpful like objective way to see if your query is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Third kind of query tip, and this is just what randos on the internet said, which is that your query letter should be 1 page or between 300 to 450 words. That's what the internet said, the end. Number 4, okay. I know I just said I don't like giving advice. I'm going to give some advice now. I don't care what anyone on the internet says. This is definitely one of these tips where if you disagree, ignore me. I will stand by this particular tip until the day I die. You do you though, okay? You do you. Here's the tip. Don't personalize your query. No, don't. Don't personalize your query. My very first one for Children with Gifts, I did personalize as often as I could. I did not do that at all for Sun Has a Shadow, for the second book that I queried. I did not personalize a single query. Every single person got the exact same query unless I changed the query itself, like the letter itself. There was only one time I personalized it, and that was because the agent requested it. Like the agent said in their like how to query me, like please personalize it at the very beginning, and so I did. Like basically explain like why are you querying me specifically. That's what she asked. Like please include that very clearly in your query. So that's the only one I personalized. The only exception to this rule, my rule of do not personalize your query, is if you were approached by the agent, whether that's online or through a pitch event, and then the agent was like, oh, please query me, then like reference, like, you liked my pitch on Twitter and here's the link or whatever. Or if you went to like a conference, obviously, right? And then the agent was like, oh, please query me. Or an editor was like, hey, please query me. Definitely personalize and mention, yes, I met you at blah, blah, blah conference and you said I should query you, so here I am. Those are the only exceptions, unless you were essentially approached by the agent or editor to query them for whatever reason. But for no reason am I just like, for no reasons out of the womb, personalizing query letters. It's a waste of time and it don't make no difference. Like, I don't think it makes a difference because I got way more agent requests, partially because the query was much better than the ones I was setting up for my first book. The query letter was better and I got more bites. So it has nothing to do with personalization. So I will stand by that one. Do not personalize your query. There ain't no point. Don't do it. And again, if you disagree, that's totally okay. You should not listen to me. I'm like so passionate about that one. Don't waste your time. Work smarter, not harder. Number 5, should you query in batches or just one at a time? Query, like, agents take a long time to respond now because they're just very inundated with letters and packages and all of that. So I think one at a time doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I think people's definition of batch querying is like depends. So I'm not going to comment on that. But I will say query fast responders first. Fork up the dollars if you can for Query Manager Premium or Plus or whatever it is. I think it's like $25 or $20 a year. Because if you do, you can take a look and see who tends to respond quicker. Like, who do you get rejections from faster? Who tends to respond to queries pretty fast? My recommendation, like I said, is to query fast responders earlier in the process, because that way you'll know sooner rather than later if your query package is working. Because if they are requesting your partial or full manuscript based on your query letter, the query letter is doing its job, which is garnering interest. If they don't want the book, then that's on the book, or subjectivity, blah, blah, blah. But like, that's in the book, right? That's not about your query anymore. And so I got a couple of bites pretty early on. And so that's how I knew, okay, my query package is good. Yes, I tease things apart, hoping I can make it better. And I think I did make it better from version 1 to 2 with The Sun Has a Shadow. But query fast responders first for that reason. Number 6, sixth tip. Read the agency's rules. Generally speaking, most agencies have a rule, which is you can only query one agent at that agency at a time. I think that's pretty standard. I don't even know if there's one that says you can query multiple agents at the agency. So generally speaking, good rule of thumb, one agent at a time at the agency. Some of them have rules. For example, I mentioned that one agent who said, please explain why you're querying me specifically in the query letter. So that's the one I personalized. Quite a few agencies, I wouldn't say a majority, but quite a few agencies have a no from one is a no from all rule, which basically means if you query one of the agents at our agency and that agent says no, or they reject and they pass, you cannot query another agent here, period. Mistakes happen. If you do it accidentally, I did it accidentally, and when I did, I would actually either pull back the query that I sent out to the agency. Like if I accidentally sent out a query to 2 agents, you try your best to keep track, but we're all human, we make mistakes. I would just like retract it as fast as possible. It was an email, so you can't really retract it because it's not through Query Manager. I would email that agent, say, I apologize, I already queried somebody at your agency. Most of the times they didn't even respond to me, so whatever. But we make mistakes and it's okay. Don't beat yourself up, you're human. Yeah, but I think that's everything. How long is this video gonna be? No idea, we'll find out. But that's everything on this video. So those are my query letters. Thank you so much for watching. I hope today's video was mildly interesting or entertaining. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one.